First up, our good friend Les Banks. Les, as you can see, has been in the business of doing front of house and monitor mixing for the last 35 years. For that time, he has been 10 of those years at the Ryman Auditorium as production manager and audio supervisor the last 25. He has also toured all over the world with such main artists as Tom Waits, Emmylou Harris, John Fogerty, Indigo Girls, Marty Stewart, and Mary Chapin Carpenter. It's good to see you, Les. Say hello.
Hello, and thank you, Raul. Nice to see you.
Thanks for joining us. Next up, the man, the legend, who keeps everything at bay at the Grand Ole Opry, controlling the front of house studer. His name is Kevin Sarge McGinty. Kevin, we call him Sarge because we love him so much. He could be our Sarge. You know, he started installing PAs back in the day, and that led him to start working with artists such as Doug Stone, Paul Brand, John Berry, Rascal Flatts, Straight Askin, and the Monkees, just to name a few. He started working at the Grand Ole Opry in 2003 and took over as the front of house engineer in 2016. Please welcome Kevin Sarge McGinty. Good to see you, Sarge.
Good to be here.
Surely last but not least, the man who keeps it all together at the Grand Ole Opry and the Ryman, Mark Thomas. Mark has been the Grand Ole Opry audio services supervisor for the last 4 years, and he's mixed audio for the Opry for the last 9 before that. He's also toured for 12 years with major acts such as Leon Russell, Wynonna, Michael McDonald, and the Steve Miller Band. Some of his Opry artists include Garth Brooks, George Jones, Loretta Lynn, and Dolly Parton. Please make welcome Mark Thomas.
Hey everybody, good to be here.
So how is everybody doing? How are we coming back slowly from COVID? These two venues, this particular venue we're going to talk about today, the Ryman Auditorium, was closed for a little while. So for those of you who are joining us, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the history of this facility. Then we're going to talk about the sound systems that have been there from the 70s until today. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the challenges to mix front of house at this particular venue. So, with that said, we'll jump right in. So, let's see. And I'll have Les and Mark, if you guys will want to take us through, give us some of the history of how this facility came to be called the Ryman Auditorium. How old is it? How did it get started? What was it used for in the beginning? Tell us about the years that it was closed and so forth.
Hey, real quick, the summary is back in the 1800s, there was this preacher from Georgia, Sam Jones. He would travel the South doing tent revivals to thousands of people. And in Nashville, there was this riverboat captain, Tom Ryman. He owned a bunch of steamboats and made his money off of gambling, booze, and hookers. Well, all this religion and people swarming to these revivals was cutting into his profits. So one day, the legend goes, him and his boys came to a tent revival to see what this fuss was all about. Well, after the sermon or the service, he went up to Sam Jones and said, "Sir, I came here with hatred in my heart. Listening to you, I want to be saved." And he went and dumped 50,000 barrels of whiskey in the river.
Oh, my.
And then he goes, "Sir, next time you come to town, I want to build you a church so you don't have to preach in these tents anymore." So he built the Ryman Auditorium, which was then called the Union Gospel Tabernacle. And their motto was, all is welcome. And anytime Sam Jones came to town, he would do a service there, but other preachers could do a service there. So it was a church. And the big thing was there was no stage, no balcony. It was in the round. And acoustically, it was made to hear the voice. So the curved walls projected the voice so people could hear. And it was popular.
So we have a couple of pictures here so people can see what the building looked like back in the day. The people lining up out on the street outside the building. And also everybody gets to see all the pews, which are still in place, I believe, right, Les and Mark? Those are still the original pews, many of them?
It's all original pews, and we used to make a lot of money selling seat cushions because they're hard.
Which kind of be great for all the reflections combined with all the stained glass and all the brick. I think it makes for a very live facility, yeah.
Very live, and as a challenge of the house engineer of the Ryman to try to calm down visiting engineers and tell them what you hear in an empty, reflective Ryman empty will change to your advantage that night when it fills up with people. So
it wasn't until 1904 that this facility actually became the Ryman Auditorium. It was actual as a dedication to.
I think 1901 or something like that.
Yeah.
Tom Ryman died, and his funeral was held at the Ryman, at the Union Gospel Tabernacle, and Sam Jones presided over the funeral. And it was like Christmas Day, I think. And he asked everyone, in honor of Tom Ryman, could we change the name from Union Gospel Tabernacle to the Ryman Auditorium? And from that
I think it started being called the Ryman Auditorium. I think a lot of people, and I think maybe, Kevin, you can take us through this a little bit on the Grand Ole Opry story, because the Grand Ole Opry performed at this venue for so many years. It became sort of, people always thought that this was the Grand Ole Opry. And so it'd be good for you to explain to people that the Grand Ole Opry is actually a show that happens now in its own venue, but, for many years happened at the Ryman.
Well, yeah, the radio show has been around since 1925, and it didn't move into the Ryman until, 43? And it's actually moved out of there in 74. So it's actually, the Opry was just at that venue for a period of time. But people so associate the Grand Ole Opry with the Ryman that people walk into the Ryman and consider it the Grand Ole Opry. So there's some confusion there.
Right. And it's interesting that, it's been broadcasting, I think, nonstop, forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had our 4,950 something episode of our Saturday night Grand Ole Opry.
Right. No, it's amazing. I mean, it's like some people forget that, all of these Grand Ole Opry shows that were happening there and that are now happening at the new venue, where the Grand Ole Opry takes place, it's all broadcasted every time. And so there's a component to the front of house mix that Kevin is handling at the Grand Ole Opry building, but there's also a separate broadcast engineer doing a whole mix to the radio station. So it's quite the operation. Always nice to point out to the people, because this is going to become important as we go forward in the presentation, to just take a look and commit to memory the fact that when you look at the building, you can see that there's these three distinct areas. You had an area right in front of the stage, which is it's all like fan-shaped semicircle. And then you have a pretty deep under balcony that opens up as it goes back. And then you have a fairly steep upper balcony with stained glass behind, which is where you're going to be mixing. So take us a little bit through the story of, the years that it was closed. In 74, the building closed. It was closed for 20 years. So talk to us about that. Talk to us a little bit about the big flood. I think that the building was affected by some of the flooding. And then, when it reopened back in 94, and what is the programming like? What kind of stuff are you doing at the Ryman now? Because I think some people might be confused that it's just a country music venue, and it's really not.
Printed out a calendar of July to December last year, 2019. And prior to all this madness, we did over 300 events a year.
Wow.
And just some acts that came in through last year: Ringo Starr, Herbie Hancock, Brian Ferry, Jason Isbell, King Crimson, Leanne Rimes, Sheryl Crow, Wu-Tang Clan.
Your favorite?
Well, it became my favorite because I never mixed hip-hop before. And
there you go.
They showed up at 6 p.m. for a 7 o'clock show, and they didn't have a sound engineer. And I figured they had 9 vocals and a DJ, and I put all the vocals at Unity. Then when I looked at the LED, if one had 1 or 2 more LEDs than the other, I figured that's the guy who's singing. I was him up, and it was. Let me tell you, it was powerful. That whole place was really pumping.
Yeah,
and it was epic. So I got my hip hop license that night. But
there you go.
And then we rent you see the stage. We rent the Ryman stage to corporations for private events and have elegant catered dinners on stage with famous songwriters with sitting on the edge of the stage facing the diners and telling them stories and play to that. So that's kind of fun. We also, we also a museum open to the public during the day. So you're kind of setting up front of house and you're in a fishbowl. And these little old ladies would come up to you. Well, is there a show tonight? I mean, there's 30 people on stage, 2 semis of gear. I didn't know you did shows. So
some people thought it was just a museum.
Finally, I had to put up a sign, who's playing that night, to stop them from asking us.
And the building has done very well, and you guys have done very well management-wise and has been recognized. Like, for example, tell us about the Polestar Awards. I know that your venue has been recognized, top awards in the industry.
I lost count. I think we got it 8 or 9 years in a row, and I think we don't qualify anymore. Matt, I think they want to just name it the Ryman Award. Let us take it back to others.
There you go.
But the thing about that is that award is important because that's voted on by our peers, tour managers, people in our industry. And for them to vote us the best venue at that size means a lot. It doesn't go unnoticed.
Well, it's important to bring this to the audience who's listening today, so they understand that, the variety of shows that are taking place, nowadays at the Ryman includes every genre of music. Therefore, as you're gonna see, we're gonna go through the 4 different sound systems that have been there from the 70s till now. You're gonna see a progression of the sound system that actually reflects, the times. Now you need a sound system that can really handle any kind of music that comes into the building, whether it's an acoustic show with Vince Gill or a night with the Wu-Tang Clan. So the PA has to have the fidelity, but also the power and the coverage, of course, to actually handle whatever act comes into the building. More interesting, Sarge, it's interesting for people if you can explain to them the fact that every, particular time of the year, you guys take the show from the building where the Grand Ole Opry is taking place and you bring it to the Ryman. What's that all about?
Well, historically, we moved the Opry show over in November till about sometimes January, sometimes February. It kind of clears up the Opry House, the other Opry House for Christmas shows. And so it's kind of a chance for us to kind of move back to our roots and kind of move downtown for a little while. So, depending on what's going on, we're usually there from November to March sometimes.
Fantastic. At the end of the session today, we're going to talk a little bit about your mixing of the Grand Ole Opry and how challenging that is. I think that unless people actually see it in action, it's difficult to comprehend the complexity of what's taking place because you guys make it look so easy. But for you as a front of house mixer for, in both venues, it's going to be very interesting to go from a much bigger, taller building that is a lot drier acoustically to, a place that is very live and you're mixing, sort of at the top of the seating area. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm curious to talk about, later on how you adapt from one venue to the other in your mixing process. So I'd like people to remember this picture because we're going to see a video in a little bit. So you'll get to see where the front of house location is all the way back there near that stained glass. But fantastic, phenomenal venue. Came back in 1994 after it was closed. Why was it closed for 20 years? You guys know?
Yeah, it was run down. The windows were broken. It was wear and tear. It wasn't upkeep. And there was no real dressing rooms backstage. So the Opry members, and there was no air conditioning. That was a really big thing.
No air conditioning, no dressing rooms. Quite the fun place.
And nobody wanted to go downtown.
Yeah, downtown was not desirable at all.
That's right. It's not the downtown Nashville that we know nowadays. It's quite different back in late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, so it was closed for 20 years in disrepair. It was rumors. There was a New York Times article. Some expert declared it wasn't even worth saving. Then in 1991, I had the pleasure of working with Miss Emmylou Harris and flew in from San Diego to do a live record in the old Ryman. And by her doing that, it kind of brought attention. Hey, we forgot the Ryman
I think you're muted there, Les. There you go.
Where we were anyway.
So you did the show with Debbie Lou, and that propelled, some people to actually consider bringing the building back.
Well, they brought attention to it, and Gaylord Entertainment Corporation bought it and remodeled it and did a great job and reopened in '94. So it was closed for 20 years.
Oh my God. How affected was it during the big flood that happened a couple of years ago in Nashville?
We were blessed.
You were blessed?
Touched, but the Opry House, and Mark could tell you about that, was destroyed, absolutely destroyed.
Yeah, I remember you guys telling us when we went to visit that you had water all the way up to the stage, I think.
Yeah, we had over 4 foot of water on the stage at the Opry House, so
Wow.
pretty much everything on the ground level had to be replaced.
And did you bring all the shows to the Ryman as much as you could during that time?
As much as we could. Ryman was already pretty booked up, so we squeezed as many as we could in at the Ryman, and then we didn't have to cancel any shows during that period. We just kept finding other venues that would take us. So we went to basketball arenas. We were in Municipal Auditorium downtown, which is a big domed arena. We played churches. We just took it anywhere that would take us, and we continued to do our broadcast for the radio, and we still multi-tracked, and we still treat it like a normal Opry, just in random venues.
But the most remarkable thing is they mobilized this show that never went anywhere in 48 hours.
Wow.
And all our friends our vendors and instrument rentals, they helped us lend us gear. Blair Brothers helped us get sound.
Impressive. The Nashville community really came together, I think, because everybody identifies themselves with the importance of this show and what it means to both to the industry and to Nashville. I think that's important.
Amazing effort, it really was.
Yeah, amazing. All right, let's dig a little bit into the history of some of the sound systems that have been there. I think it'll be surprising for people. Remember the way the room looks, and then let's talk a little bit about what systems were used back in the day. And so these are the 4 systems we're going to look at we think that from the early 70s, maybe 1970, 71, if not a little earlier, the Shure Vocal Master was deployed at the Ryman, and we'll take a look at that. And then, the building was closed for 20 years. When it reopened, it had a custom design and custom built JBL system for 12 years. And then Vertex system came in 2006, which was there till 2018. And most recently, JBL VTX system was installed in 2018. Both the Vertex and the VTX systems were installed by Claire Solutions. All right, so let's take a quick dive into the Shure Vocal Master, which I think a lot of people would be surprised as to how minimalistic, by today's standards, was this system. You had three main components of the system. There were some Shure column speakers. If you go back and look at the history of some of these systems, some of them were used for the Beatles concert back in the day, and I think these together with some of the original column speakers from JBL were kind of like the predecessors to some of the line array stuff that we have today. But you can see a very very simple approach that was used back then. Did you have any information from that list from when that system was used?
Just to note, the one sound guy was located on stage left in the balcony booth.
You said stage left in the balcony booth.
Yeah, so he had a view of the stage, and that one sound guy delivered the music over the air for WSM,
right,
over to the Shure Vocal Master, and he was able to give anyone who plugged in an electric instrument on stage through the foldback. You might see some speakers hanging on the stage.
Yep, we'll take a look at that. So you can see here the mix position. If you look here on the left picture, there is the 302C, the 6-channel mixer, right? All of 6 channels.
That was from the Vocal Master, but that board on the right, I just found out, this guy, Jimmy Gilmore, is restoring it to a workable state, and it'll be like in the Hall of Fame pretty soon.
So that was the console that was sending the broadcast mix to the radio station.
That's correct, yes.
And as you guys, yep.
That console would take the various inputs and break it down into a vocal bus and a music bus and then an announcement bus. And they fed the music and the vocals over to the Shure Vocal Master mixer. They wouldn't feed the announcer over there because they wanted the announcer nice and dry for radio.
I got you. And you can see here, you know, later on we're going to look at some pictures of the amp racks that are there today. But you can see back in the day the PM300s amplifiers that were used, you know, back in the day, and a close-up picture of what the column speakers actually looked like, and you can actually see the driver arrangement, again, going back to this whole concept of line array theory, which, you know, these cabinets just were really sort of designed to work really well in the vocal range. You know, the drivers, the size of the drivers, you know, what you would consider mid-sized drivers, were really designed to actually provide better pattern control and extend, you know, the vocal range frequencies. So it's not exactly a lot of subwoofer going on, no Wu-Tang Clan happening in this PA.
But yet somehow it worked. And, you know, these old people that come to the museum tell us, oh, I remember coming here as a kid. And I go, what did it sound like? He goes, it sounded great.
Yeah, here's a picture of what you were talking about a minute ago, where you can see the guitar amps, you know, and a monitoring speaker from the Shure system, you know, that were already pre-hung. You know, they were like permanently there. You just walked in and plugged into a line, huh?
Yeah, you were not allowed to bring amps on stage, and you just plug into a junction box, and you don't dare ask for any more volume than what that one sound guy gave you.
I don't know. I think you'd like to go back to those rules at some point in time.
If you look at the picture and look all the way across the stage up on the second floor, that little window, you could see the sound booth. So that's where the sound guys were mixing everything from above the stage.
That's impressive, because what is the door that walks out to the balcony that we have used? Was that door already there? Could they walk out of the booth to get out into the audience?
Back then, there was no proscenium wall. Actually, the balcony wrapped over side of the stage, so where this photographer is standing, right above him would be some audience, and you could buy those seats over the stage. But on the stage left side, instead of selling those seats, they actually put a booth in. So that's where they're mixing from. But on the stage right side, you could sit over the stage and hand down your program and get autographs and stuff.
Oh, very nice. It
wasn't until '94 when they built a real proscenium wall and then took out those extra pews and put in dressing rooms and stuff.
Or probably put some air conditioning. Very nice. I wonder, like, you know, what the programming was like. Did they have the same format that they do now for the Grand Ole Opry shows, Sarge? I mean, did they use the same kind of a house band and then you come and play with the house band?
Yeah, it was still the same kind of host, you know, 30-minute segments, you know, host, an announcer talks it to a host brings on a band, host opens and closes a segment. In fact, like our Friday and Saturday shows kind of harken back to that. I mean, that's kind of the origin of the way we do things, and that's why a lot of people come to see the show and they're like, "What's going on? This is weird."
You gotta love the upright piano. I don't see any drums in there. There's no drums.
Drums were not allowed.
Drums were not allowed. What's up with that?
I think I've heard it was 1974 or 72 when they first allowed drums, and that was just like a simple little. I think it was just I think at that point it was just a snare drum, honestly.
You could do the Willie Nelson setup of a snare with a couple of things, and that's it. You know?
Yeah, it was like Dylan going electric. People didn't like it.
Right, and it's packed. I mean, if you can look at the picture there, I mean, it's just people all the way to the back.
But just imagine when you got two Shure Vocal Masters and the Ryman, is the way the acoustics were, drum kit would obliterate that stage. I mean,
right.
So it's kind of the source of the.
Then you have
very nice.
Four guys singing around one mic. Those are the four guys. Those are the house band backup vocalists.
Yeah, we're going to have Sarge and Mark talk a little bit later on about the, what is that mic called? The big mic or
big
the
rhythm?
Big rhythm. We're gonna have to tell us a little bit about the big rhythm mic when we get to the mixing section. All right, so this is the early 70s. Of course, the building shuts down in 74. Probably not much happened there for those 20 years. And then Gaylord takes it over. And that I would have to think that was a massive refurb project to actually bring the building back to life, because the outside of the building was still there, but I would have to guess that everything inside had to be scrapped pretty good.
Plus, they built an extension to the building where it housed a gift shop and a lobby.
Mm-hmm.
They changed the entrance from Fifth Avenue to Fourth Avenue, and to build those dressing rooms. That was the big deal.
And bathrooms.
Right.
Yeah,
and bathrooms. And air conditioning.
I think you would need that. I wonder, any idea what would it cost back in the 70s to go to a show? Probably kind of cheap. That's a good question. But back already when they opened in '94, obviously they were charging, so very nice.
Real interesting, as we all know, the original design specs were put a sound system in there, but we will never have anything more than acoustic or bluegrass music. And that went out the window on day one.
But yeah, it's interesting looking at this system that was there from '94 to '06, which is all loaded with JBL drivers. You can see that's a left, center, right set of clusters flown. So you have clusters pointing to the upper seating area as well as downfills. But from this subwoofer side of things, you only had two stacks of subs. Double 15, double stacks. One left and one right. And so not exactly heavy sub low end back in the day, pretty minimalistic from that perspective. So were you there for that part of it, Les?
I came in '94 and said, "Hey, I'm on the road, but if you guys ever need any help part-time, let me know." So I worked there part-time. But I mixed on that system a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so hard. You go, how did we do that? How did we really make all that work? But we did. You work, you use what you got, and you make it work. And then of course you realize the limitations. But it was.
And drummers were allowed to come in at this point in time.
Oh yeah, I think the first show was with Alan Jackson and
there you go.
Big special.
Yeah, Alan was pretty hot back those days. I remember we did a lot of shows with them.
But I have a little note from the gentleman who installed it, Craig Jansen, and he goes,
yeah. He's a well-known consultant and designer, did a lot of projects back in the early days with DAW and with us.
He goes, the DSP was all Uri that was programmed out of Denmark. Mm-hmm. Lots of long nights beta testing the software and downloading updated firmware to the DSP up until showtime. The amps were all Crown. MA 3600s on the lows and maybe CT amps on the mids and the highs. Somehow it worked.
Yeah, I think he commented on the fact that the low frequency, Craig was well known for designing bezel arrays and some other, low frequency arrays that actually had pattern control. So I think that he used a combination of 12-inch and 8-inch drivers in each section, left, center, right, to actually give you some pattern control, the way that things were steered electronically and the way that the drivers were arranged within the upper boxes. So that was, pretty advanced if you think about it back in the day, as opposed to just putting some trapezoidal cabinets up there and praying for the best. I mean, there was some pretty good science up there. So,
but the point to make out is that from '94 until present, we've had a great relationship with JBL, and we stayed with it. There must be a reason, Raul.
It's the weather. And then, if for a lot of people watching, maybe, this is I should have made this a trivia question and asked people to actually enter into their Q&A box what console was this and see who could come up with this. One of my favorite consoles back in the early touring days for me, Soundcraft Europa. I think this one had 40 or 48 channels, something like that.
40 inputs.
40 inputs, boy. 40 inputs. No recall.
We had a sidecar too. We had to add a Mackie to get everything else.
Oh yeah.
Involved.
Who was do you remember who was the front of house engineer that was operating this console most of the time?
Well, Tommy Hensley was with the Opry, I guess less otherwise.
Very nice.
And then there was another guy, John Slimgrig. He was the house guy. But, that whole thing about recall, which we take for granted, while the bands are changing during sound check, you're scrambling to write down settings.
Right. I'm sure all of you guys had the little cheat sheets with where you would mark all your settings on every strip.
There's no time for cheat sheets.
Oh my God, maybe you get back a little bit, but you never get all the way back.
Right.
Just worry about the gains.
There you go. Very nice. Yeah. And how was that console there till 06 or did it get changed before that?
Yeah, we swapped it out with the PM5D in 06.
I got you. So 12 years gets in the system, and frankly, by 2006, line array systems were already, pretty well known because we Vertec 89 came out in 2000, and VDOS had come out before that. AAW had some other models. By this time, 2006, line array was pretty well and into the industry, so that probably propelled some of the change that happened in 2006. So this is where we're gonna play this video so that people who are watching can get to see part of the new sound system in 2006, but also get to see a loading and how the gear gets into the building, so you can see how we go from the truck to the road and into the building. So let's roll this video.
So that band was Government Mule that we loaded in that day. And
yeah, I think he had an all original, either a D1 or a D5 back in the day. And so, in 2005, 2006 starts the change to move to line array systems. And I think Nick is on the call. We were going to talk a little bit about the different sort of the componentry of what was using the systems. I think it's interesting that the system was actually split into an upper sort of stereo system that kind of covered the balcony, and then a lower stereo system that actually cover the area in front of the stage, and then start to get into the under balcony. But then you have those 8 under balcony speakers, as you saw on the video. Let me see if I can have another picture here. Nick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so remind us, what was in the Vertec 88? That was, the box came out in 2005, if I recall correctly.
Yes. So it's a dual 12-inch line array. Each enclosure contains 2 12s and 4 mid-range drivers, as well as a pair of compression drivers on the high-frequency section.
And then I think the venue had also split subs where this is the 40, I think this were the original 4880s.
Correct.
Right. So double 18. And then in the front, you had the smaller compact Vertec, which is the 4887A. What was in that, Nick? I think the 87A over here is it's a double 8 compact box, right?
I'm sorry, my connection is really bad, so I can't hear you very well.
Yep. So the lower part of the system, the 4887As, it was a 3-way box also, but it was bi-amped, and it had 2 8s for the lows, and it also had 4 4-inch for the mids. And then we had 2 1-inch for the highs, slightly wider coverage than the Vertec 4888. And I think you have a stack of 4. What are those ground stacked on, Mark? What are those things? Just a platform?
Yeah, they just made a box out of wood, just kind of get them up a little bit. The stage is kind of short compared to where the audience is. So if people stand up, it's easy to block what's sitting on the stage. We still have that problem with front fill a little bit. Right.
But obviously between the double stack of subs and the 4 4887s, we have to remind the people who are watching that the seating area wraps all the way around, all the way to the front of the stage. So anything you put there is going to block the sightlines to some of the performers, right? Yep.
Block sightlines and shoot them right inside of the head with a high-powered cabinet.
Right.
They don't care.
And then the under balconies, it was an AM series, an install box called the 4212. It's basically a 12-inch 2-way 60 by 40. And we had 8 of those, which, back in the day was probably a fairly, acceptable, standard, under balcony type loudspeaker. But what people don't realize is that the under balcony, from where that speaker is to the very back, it's pretty far, and it opens up at a rake. So you really wanted something that could give you like an asymmetrical coverage. So we'll see when we get into the VTX system. This was one of the areas that got massive improvements. But this system served you well for 12 years, 2006 to 2018.
The lower volume shows it did okay, but if the louder shows, the under balcony would run out of headroom so fast.
Sure.
You lose all vocal intelligibility under there pretty quick.
I can imagine. I think it's important for people to notice the fact that the opening, right at the edge where the upper balcony, to the floor. What is that? 9 feet, maybe, that opening from the floor to the ceiling of the upper balcony.
9 or 10. It's pretty tight.
It's pretty tight, and then it opens up pretty significantly. So it's a totally different acoustical space. So you kind of have like 3 different areas to deal with. So, but this system was there for 12 years, and then of course time progressed, and let's see what else we have in here.
Technology improved.
Yep, technology improved. We came out with the VTX series. V25 came out, V20 came out, and then of course, the end of 2016, the A series, the VTX A series came out, and that's when I think we started talking again about the upgrade to your facility. And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that we did a lot of demos, spent a lot of time really with a demo system in the building to understand exactly how what would work properly. We didn't want to take any chances. We worked. Claire spent a lot of time working with us on that. and Nick, who's on the call, spent a lot of time, where we measured the building. I think we talked about this earlier, Les, where we wanted to make sure that we didn't change the characteristics of the sound on the stage. So we really wanted to control the energy and how it came back onto the stage for the performers. Because we wanted to improve the sonic signature of the audience area, but more importantly, we wanted to preserve how the performers felt on stage. And so we spent a lot of time doing measurements from the stage to actually characterize that. What are some of the other changes that we went through here? Les, can you talk about a little bit about how the system is now hung on the proscenium? And
you're able to go A/B, but the old system was hung way up in the ceiling, down firing into the audience. Mm-hmm. And we did some demos and got approval from management for sight lines. That it was all the computer rendering and programs said if we could put the speakers underneath the proscenium, the coverage will be superior. So we went from like 6 boxes to 10 boxes. We were able to hang them underneath the proscenium and eliminate those ugly giant sight blocking speakers on stage like the 4887s. And that was big. That was huge. Mark and team measured how many seats we'd block doing it this way versus not, and got approval from management. Mm-hmm. The big thing is we didn't have to paint them white. And
right.
that was worth the price of admission right there.
That probably helped. So you got nicer sight lines, a cleaner stage. You don't have upper clusters that are shooting through the lighting fixtures. This was part of the first version. Notice that we also have all the subs are now central as opposed to split subs up on flown and on the ground. So the bulk of the subwoofer energy is now concentrated, and I think we did some electronic processing in there. Let me see if we have. Notice that the first version of the install, we also had the VTX F35 for an outfield box, and that was upgraded, I believe, end of last year, Nick, or beginning of this year? Trying to remember.
July of 2019, we changed the F35s out and actually installed 8 per side Vertec 4886 line array enclosures.
Right. So here's a close-up of the clusters. There's 10, 812. And so, Nick, can you talk a little bit about the way that the clusters are split between 812 and what's the difference between the 812 and the 812W, if you want to walk us through that a little bit? If you can. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Yeah.
So each main left and right array consists of a total of 10 enclosures, with the top 4 boxes being an A12, which is a 90-degree horizontal dispersion. Bottom 4 enclosures are A12Ws. Interestingly enough, the exact same components in each enclosure, only difference being is the waveguide on the A12W is 120 degrees horizontal. So we were able to cover a larger area on the very front area of the seating, but have the same sonic signature between the upper half and lower half with the array.
Right. And this system, obviously, with the new A12, gave you significant improvements in headroom. You had a wider coverage. Of course, this uses all our new driver technology with very minimal harmonic distortion. So a very clean sound, very clean sight lines, much more powerful subwoofers. We went from 4880s to S28. So, the 4880 had the original 2258 driver in it, and now the S28 had the 2269, which are, subs that have significant low frequency extension. So, some of those shows that, require, urban music, hip hop, and so forth, and even some of the country music that is happening today is using a lot of sample effects that go down to, 40, 30 hertz. So those subwoofers can definitely carry that. So here's an interesting thing, and we should probably talk a little bit about the under balcony system. I remember, Mark and Les, if you guys can talk about this a little bit, one of the things that you guys really talked to us about, and we had this long conversation with Dan Hines from Claire, was you really wanted to improve both the coverage, the power capability, and the imaging under the balcony. You felt that was one of the areas that was really that you really wanted to improve. And originally we thought of using F-35s in there, but that wasn't giving us the even coverage that we wanted because it's a point and shoot box. And so, you know, how this is an arrangement now where we have 4 subcompact line array boxes. This is the Vertec 4886. And if you notice, there is a double 12 subwoofer called the 4883 right behind each cluster of 4. And part of the reason why we wanted to go with the 4886 is with a small line array, you know, format, was to be able to do an asymmetrical, you know, coverage pattern. Nick, do you remember how the cabinets are wired? I think the top 2 or the top 1, I cannot remember.
It goes in top 2 and bottom 2 are individual amplifier channels.
So we could actually adjust the gain shading to actually provide an asymmetrical, you know, sort of a coverage, you know, and even out the response from the back, you know, to the transition area into the main PA. So that was actually gave you a lot of power and full frequency response under the balcony. How did you like it, Les? What are people, front house engineers commented on that?
You know, that's the whole thing. The under balcony was our most underwhelming zone, if you will, of the Ryman. You know, so we went from 8 passive speakers to 32 of these 4886s, and the coverage and the improvement was astounding. And that was the one thing everyone always complained about. So 5-star credit goes to us being able to, Claire Brothers, to fabricate brackets, keep it out of sight lines, and get the coverage.
Yeah, that bracket, that's right. That, you know, U-shape, L-shape bracket that's there. This is a custom fab from Claire. So a lot of credit to Dan and his team for making that happen. You know, this is the other part that I think a lot of people don't realize is there was not a lot of time to install this.
That's true. We had 5 days, but weeks of pre-install and pre-planning, a lot of shop work, prefabrication. But literally on that Sunday, whatever that day was, we had 5 days to get this going before the Opry came back that week. And that was an amazing Army and example of teamwork and pre-planning, and we pulled it off. We fooled them again.
And, you know, keep in mind for the people who have not been at the Ryman, and I encourage anybody who goes to Nashville to go and visit, is that the building is continuously doing tours all day long till like 4 p.m., I think. So it's not
Raul,
like, you know.
Tell them how, you know, you wanted to test the PA, but you had to wait till the tours were over.
Absolutely. It's like there was no, you know, we would like be ready to start measuring things, and they were like, sorry, can't make any noise until 4:30. We're like, what? We have a show in 2 hours. It's like, yeah. So, but yeah, it was definitely great collaboration across, you know, all parties involved. And it was interesting that we not only brought sort of the latest technology to the main front PA, but we also, you know, kind of looked for what was the right tool in our tool bag. You know, we would try different things. Okay, we started with F-35, for example, for this outfills, and we were not getting sort of the response, you know, the even response that was desired. So, okay, what is a different solution? And we end up with 4886s, you know, on the outside hangs, which is interesting because now the 4886, you know, it's used on the outfills, the under balconies, and also on the front fills. So you have that same sort of sound, and all of those zones, you know, it combines really well with the VTX 812 on the mains. And also everything went up in power, better coverage. I think another detail under the balcony, you might remember, Nick, is that we alternated. I think the clusters are alternating left and right. I cannot remember.
That's true.
That's correct, yeah.
So it was
Another major factor that I feel that contributes to the overall success of the system is just the level of control resolution that's put into this. Some interesting statistics about the system are that There's 96 individual speaker enclosures, 104 amp channels. And so that gives us the ability to control at such a fine resolution that it provides great coverage as well as consistency throughout the entire venue.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's just some other crazy statistics like 16 18-inch drivers, 56 12-inch drivers, 2 8s, 116 6.5-inch drivers, 85 1/2-inch drivers, 232 2.5-inch drivers, and 180 compression drivers of varying sizes.
Man,
all of that for
Fun numbers for
2,200
you.
seats.
it's a good thing we're just doing an unplugged, you know, an unplugged show with
Right.
two mandolins and a vocal. No, but that's the thing, you know, sometimes you'll go from one day to the other, where one day you'll be doing, like I said, Vince Gill Unplugged, and then, you know, this next weekend you're going to do Joe Bonamassa, and he's going to definitely, you know, put the metal to the pedal. I mean, he's just going to crank it up in there. So you need a system that can actually give you that clean, you know, response, you know, when you need it, you know. It's interesting that we also use the 4886s as front fills. Yep.
The other interesting thing, kind of like I was stating there, is that, you know, with a room like the Ryman with those sort of acoustical characteristics, this would not be successful if there wasn't just a very high level of control. Otherwise, things would just be out of control and would overpower the room and actually potentially make things worse. So, you know, it says a lot for how things were laid out from a design perspective and how we did all the circuiting and things from that side. So,
yeah, no, fantastic. Here's a shot that can, you know, talking about the amplifiers. You know, I was thinking back to those three PM300s that we had with the Shure Vocal Master. I think we have, you know, all of these amplifiers are 4-channel, 4x3500 HDs. So I think that we have a few more amplifier channels now.
Just for the record, I did clean the filters.
That was the first thing I noticed.
Okay, good. Here's a nice clean shot of the venue. So that's the system that it's in today. You know, tell us less, you know, from the front of house. You know, you have to do, and this is going to be a transition to talk about, you know, the challenges to mix at the Ryman. But you also function as the production manager. You have to deal with a lot of incoming production teams, front of house engineers, production managers. What has been the response of the incoming engineers? How are people liking the system and so forth?
Well, the fun part of being here so long is you see, it's like a high school reunion. You see the same engineers year after year, and they come around in different bands with the same band, and, you know, they come in, listen to new PA, and just give a big thumbs up. Man, you guys did a great job. And then you get new engineers. Actually, it doesn't matter if you're new or a 30-year veteran. Some people are very nervous to be in here. There was a 30-year veteran of a rock band. He goes, I've been doing this for 30 years, and this is the only gig I've ever been nervous about. And a lot has to do with an empty Ryman. Sounds crazy loud and just has no direction, and it's swimming. And I try to calm them down and say, hey, you got a sold-out show tonight. It's going to sound great. And then if they don't have a systems tech, I'll go down there with my Lake tablet while they're mixing and make sure the downstairs and under balcony is doing what he wants it to do. And the big thing is trying to get people not to mix as loud as they're used to, because in this room, I don't care who you are or what you're doing, you're going to lose the room after a certain level. And then it's a point of diminishing return. And it's not, I apologize for not the great mix position. I encourage them to walk around. And it's also interesting, you know, like Raul and Nick tune the room wonderfully, spend hours and hours tuning the room. And some people want to reinvent the wheel and will take, because you can't make any noise till 4:30 and doors are at 6:30, they'll still take the time and put, you know, mics, earthwork mics, and sample the room and pink noise it and waste all their time. And then there's people who say, "Oh, you guys did it." The funny thing is, the results are the same. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's a tune system. The delay times are perfect because of you guys. And, some people get nervous and some people just go with it. Some people listen to you. You're either their friend or their, "Oh, you don't know what you're doing, you know." But,
I'm curious because I know you have Joe Bonamassa coming in, and you've had some other big shows come into the building, and we just saw that video. Not exactly a huge loading dock area, as far as doors. So you have gear that doesn't come through the door sometimes. You go, yeah, that cannot come in.
Well, the old 10 pounds of poop in a 5-pound bag happens more often than not, and we try to convince people to leave stuff on the truck, and some listen, some don't. Yeah. But an interesting thing about the Ryman, there's a mystique to it. And Garth Brooks, this guy sells out stadiums. And he, for years, would never step foot in the Ryman without judging because he felt he wasn't worthy. And then one time, Loretta Lynn called him and said, "Can you play acoustic guitar for me for one song on a Grammy salute?" He goes, "Honey, I'd love to, but I would be too nervous," and hung up. And his wife, Trisha Hewitt, said, "Would you call her back and get over this phobia?" So he called her back and accepted her offer, but he was nervous. And then 2 years later, he came in with his whole band to launch the Garth channel for XM Sirius. And he was literally, tears are rolling down his eyes. He goes, "I don't know why I stayed away so long. I feel like I'm home. This is hallowed ground." And people get that. Roger Daltrey from The Who declared this the greatest place he's ever played. Greater than Woodstock, greater than Leeds. Mumford & Sons, they came over. They haven't rehearsed for a while for 3 sold-out nights. Marcus Mumford is kind of jittery and nervous, and he's forgetting words. And he goes back, starts playing the drums, and has to run off the stage and get sick. And the whole band left the whole stage for 8 minutes to regroup because they had the Ryman jitters.
I think that the building has something cathartic about it. It just kind of, to so many musicians, it probably means that they have made it to a level that perhaps they never thought they would ever get to. It's that kind of validation.
My joke is it mellows out the crankiest road crew. It's on their bucket list. It's not just another gig. They're really looking forward. They're always looking forward to play the Ryman. So they leave not as cranky as they usually are.
And I think you should talk to people about the fact that the pews are still empty. You still have exposed brick. You still have stained glass right behind your front of house, mixed position. And so
Joe Bonamassa just ordered drape for his event to cover all that stained glass this weekend.
Well, there you go.
Really thick.
Out of all the rooms I've mixed in my career, that the Ryman changes more than any that I've ever been in between an empty house and a full house. I've never seen anything quite like it. It's just the pews are all curved where all the energy, when it's empty, all the energy bounces off the pew and heads right towards the center of the stage. But when you fill all those with people and it blocks that wood, it's an immense amount of change. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know that you and Sarge spend the bulk of your time at the Grand Ole Opry, and if you contrast the two buildings, the Grand Ole Opry house, it's bigger, it's taller, the mixed position is kind of in the center of the array, a little bit of the pattern. The pews are padded, so it's a lot drier, so the acoustics don't change quite so much from an empty house to a full house, and the kind of music you're doing is a lot more similar, day after day after day after day. While at the Ryman, you have completely the opposite. So I'm kind of curious, Sarge, as we jump into the section of talking. Here's a picture of the front of house location at the very back of the upper balcony, and I don't know how many feet are there from the front of house console to the stained glass. It's probably 12 feet, 10 feet?
If that.
Yeah. And, you are one of the things that we, all of us were there for days on end, really playing with that 1 degree coverage of the PA. Do you aim that part of the PA, so it gets to the front of house console, and then it doesn't stop there. It gets to the glass, and that excites the room? Or do you kind of maybe take it down a degree or so and just, you just step out of your console and go down the steps to the pews? Because you're actually above the pews, where you're mixing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Sarge, how do you reprogram your brain? Because, you spend the bulk of your time at front of house at the Grand Ole Opry, and then you kind of, at any point in time, come and mix a show, at this venue. Do you go and sit there for a few minutes and recalibrate with some of your favorite music?
One thing is we do a classic show every week now. So every Thursday we're back at the Ryman. So it's not like it used to be, where you're gone for 6 months and you're at this big venue, and then all of a sudden you're in this place for a sound check or something, and you're just like, oh. And it takes a few days to get used to. I think now when we come back to the Ryman, it's like just going home. It's
right.
Even in these days, I guess we were away for like 4 months, and it wasn't that dramatic. But I think it's just over the years, you know what to expect, and you're going to be fine. It's just getting your muscle memory with the consoles right,
Well, yeah, which we're going to talk about here in a second. I'm curious, Les, in this picture, I think the lighting guys are reprogramming something down at the edge of the balcony. And I was just curious, did you ever have any production teams come in and go, yeah, we want to put our audio console down here? It's like, not even think about it.
No, but we had one unnamed sound engineer that threw such a fit that we had to give in. And we had to strike all the furniture and everything you see over at the Lighting World there and let him put his XL4 in there.
I'm not even going to go there.
And that was probably the worst scenario. But
because normally the guest console would go to your left at front of house. It would be house left.
Right in that alcove where that one seat is right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I apologize to them. It's not the great mix position, but it's not a studio. You guys are on the road. Every venue's different.
Well, the thing is that many engineers have come through and made it work really well and have some phenomenally sounding shows in there. So
then this one guy goes, I got to be in the center. I go, what? This is not a perfect world.
Right. Phenomenal. All right. So, I think it'd be great to spend a little bit of time giving the audience a little bit of a flavor of what it is what is the Grand Ole Opry show, and what are some of the technical challenges? Maybe Mark, you can take us through some of that. What are the technical challenges to actually make the actual show happen from the audio perspective? Because it's just, I've seen it multiple times, and I gotta tell you, that's not a front of house position that I would ever want to jump into.
Yeah, it's its own unique thing. I'd never seen anything like it till I actually saw it for myself, my own eyes. It's based on being a radio show, kind of a variety show. There used to be skits and comedy, and nowadays we don't have much of that. We've got some stand-up comedians that come and do some sets here and there, but it's mostly all music, anywhere between 8 and about 14 acts in a 2-hour period. About half of them will use our house band. We've got a 10-piece house band with background vocalists, drums, bass, multiple guitar players, steel, and some artists use them. Some bring their own band. Sometimes a younger artist may only be allowed to bring 2 of their own members, that they get to choose which band members they bring, and then the rest of it will be the Opry band. It just kind of varies kind of where you are in your career, honestly. Most of the bands don't get a sound check. We find out ahead of time exactly what they need, what inputs they need, and how we're going to space them out on the stage. And a lot of them don't ever hear anything before they walk out there and play their first note. They plug in their guitar, and they're announced, and they go.
Wow.
It's a lot of file management, keeping track of, your snapshots, making sure you're storing correctly, you're not overwriting the wrong artist, you're updating artists when you need to update it. And then some nights you're like, okay, well, this set was a mess, I'm not going to save it tonight. Or they had a different drummer or a different bass player than they normally do, I'm not going to save this one scene tonight. But generally we have a separate scene for every act. Some consoles, I think our monitor console probably has like 400 acts in it now.
So you're currently mixing the front of house is a Studer. What model Studer is it? It's a Vista X?
Yeah, it's a Vista M2 at the Opry House and PM7 at the Ryman.
And you have a PM10 or PM7 on monitors at the Grand Ole Opry now?
We've got PM10 at both places. Oh, PM10 at the Ryman. PM10 at the Ryman for monitors, yeah.
So talk to us about this. I think this is a picture of the iPad or whatever tablet you guys use to communicate the information, because your set changes are very fast. You got to move wedges. You got to recall a particular input strip. For that particular artist, you got to recall in-ear monitor mixes for somebody. So what's happening here?
So generally, we've got anywhere between a minute and 2 minutes to change bands. It's usually during a commercial break.
Did you say a minute to 2 minutes?
A minute to 2 minutes, depending on how long the commercial is. And that commercial we're not cutting away and replaying a commercial. It's a live commercial from our stage, from the podium, while we're doing the changeovers on stage. The picture on the screen is a snapshot from how we were using FileMaker to keep track of all that data. That's our basic stage plot, where the left side of that picture represents our downstage edge, and where it says mix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are where we've got wedges, and that's kind of where we line everybody up. So somebody will send me a stage plot, and it's got their band all over the place. Well, I just squeeze them into these places because I know they got to fit in one of these spots to be on our show. So if you look closely there, it shows exactly what vocals are needed, what DIs were used, what instruments were where, and then down low it's got ear monitors. So ear 1 is somebody, ear 2. So we can keep track, and if we put everybody in the same positions every time, then our snapshots are good. So we know if that mandolin plugged into DI2 last time, well, if we plug it back into DI2, and if he's got the same mandolin, all you have to do is unmute it and go. So that carries you through a lot of snapshots. Just that we keep such good notes, and we can kind of replicate it and try to do it the same way every time. Even the ear mixes, if you give that, this is Carrie Underwood, so she's on ear 3. As long as she's got pack ear 3 every time, she's going to have the right ear mix. So it's just a lot of little details you got to keep track of, and it's on FileMaker, so then it can be shared with all the different engineers in the room. So front of house can access it, monitors, broadcast. The stage hands, they've got iPads with this information on it, and if it needs to be edited in real time, somebody just calls out on the radio, hey, everybody check your Carrie Underwood stage plot, and it updates in real time. So we can make changes real fast on the fly, and everybody's used to the nomenclature and all the naming that we do.
And so do you take when you take the Opry show to the Ryman, you're doing it like on Thursdays now, Sarge was saying, do you take the same microphone package from the Opry?
Over time, we've just made sure that we've matched everything at both houses. So we've got almost the identical backline, almost the identical microphone system. So it makes us being able to move back and forth in between houses very simply.
What are some of the microphones like? For example, I was enamored with that big, what is it called, Sarge? The big rhythm?
Big rhythm?
Yeah. What is that all about?
I think that goes back to Hank Snow. He needed a separate mic for his acoustic. And I think one of his players had one called Little Rhythm. And, back in the day, they used to name things odd names.
So what kind of mics are those?
It's a BCM 104. Is that right? I think that's a Neumann. Yeah. It's a good mic for people to just kind of gather around. It's a big, wide open, large diaphragm that a lot of like bluegrassers like to just kind of, crowd around and play.
Does it ever worry you? I mean, have you noticed a difference, as you have gone through, the different PAs? Do you get, game before feedback when you're doing some of these shows where you got 4 or 5 people around the one mic? Have you feel now, pretty comfortable pushing the fader?
Yeah, it's not a problem at all at the Ryman because you can mix quiet. And I've kind of always I get what I can get and I stop. I mean, and it's usually plenty. I rarely have a feedback problem or have any feedback problems with the BCM 104s. Sometimes you get a lot of stuff in there from a bunch of low mid, depending if somebody sticks a large diaphragm out in front of a band with a drum kit, then it's not going to work out that well. But no problem, especially the Ryman. I never have feedback problems with the Ryman as a rule.
Very nice.
The new systems really help too, because it's so directional, and we brought the speakers down where it's closer to the listener, so it's not as far of a path for that sound to travel as well, which is helpful.
Right. And it's like Nick was saying, everything is, we got a lot of control over the system, so you can have a lot of power where you need it, and just also we spend a lot of time aiming things just to kind of put it on where the people is, like the famous Ted Leamy phrase, aim the loudspeaker toward the audience, So that probably helps. And of course, let's not forget that there is always a broadcast taking place, through this whole thing. So there's got to be a whole other component to the show besides what you guys are going through in your section. So, you got to get it right for both front of house, monitors, but also for the broadcast engineer that has got to make sure that gets out there.
And since the pandemic, we've really kind of grown our broadcast side. Since we can't have live audiences, we've really added extra outlets. So now we've got a television station of our own that we broadcast to. We're broadcasting. We've got a YouTube channel that does our shows on YouTube Live. We've got Facebook Live.
Wow.
We've got the radio. We've got XM radio. And we've got several different buses that have mixed minuses that go to different places so they can add their own hosts or whatever else they need to add.
I got you. Fantastic. Well, I think this kind of covers. Is there something that people should come to see a Grand Ole Opry show? First of all, I think that would be a unique experience to actually see. And the funny thing is, like we experienced when we were there adjusting the system one of those nights, you just never know. You might have somebody like Garth Brooks just show up one night, or Vince Gill just show up one night. And, it might be Vince Gill unplugged to close the night, and that's just heaven, So that was pretty impressive. So I encourage everybody who's listening, if you're ever in Nashville, try to make it to a Grand Ole Opry show, and if it's at the Ryman, all the better. So I think we have a couple of questions that I'm gonna bring up. There was a question that our good friend Chris Cookie Huff asked earlier, and I know that Les, that you answered the question, but I think the audience would like to see this. Which is, what is the typical SPL A-weighted of the shows? And Les, you were commenting that the rock bands, every act is different, but some of the rock bands will do 98 to 102. And of course, the system, will easily bring you to 105. So it's, but I think it's important, to follow what Les was saying, the room is going to win. So it's, do you ever have to go tap the shoulder, Les, and say, hey?
Yeah, I mean, I try to say, you're losing the room, you're overpowering the room, which happens a lot, if you go too loud. One real loud rock band guy goes, I never have a good mix here. You have any ideas? I go, yeah, your lead guitar player, because it all happens what happens down on stage. Your lead guitar player has 3 amps on 11, but yet you still put him in the mix. Why are you doing that? Don't put him in the mix. Everyone's going to hear him. Build around it. And then he goes, well, and the whole building thought it was better, but he said, I just didn't feel it where I was. I go, it's not about you.
Right. Yeah, there's a few other people in here, right? Go walk down there, take a walk to the front of the balcony and check it out.
It's amazing how some engineers don't even walk.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because nowadays with all the digital consoles and, tablets and everything else, you could be walking around and adjust your mix from anywhere else. So that's very interesting.
We're too old.
There was a question, somebody was asking if that previous front of house, the analog console, if it was a Soundcraft 400, and I said, no, it's a Soundcraft Europa. So yeah, Tim McCullough, it's that Soundcraft Europa that will not turn on the truck. I carried one on tour, and yes, it will not turn on the truck. So,
I remember that.
Probably good to keep it up there, but it sounded phenomenal. Great sounding, really
warm.
warm.
On every channel.
Yep. So let's see. There's a question here. Says, are the front of house and broadcast mixer using stems, or is it 2 full mixes?
It's 2 full mixes. At the Ryman, I think we're up to 72 inputs. Is that right? Is that our limit at the Ryman? I'm trying to think how many we've got on the split. And at the Opry House, we're over 80.
72 transformer isolated splits. So every board has their own feed.
Excellent. And I think one of those consoles is also, one of your broadcast consoles was also a Studer somewhere, I think.
Yeah, at the Opry House, we've got a Studer Vista 9. And at the Ryman, it's a Harrison Tryon.
Yeah, very nice broadcast rooms, guys. Very nice mix rooms, just phenomenally sounding. Let's see. Cookie Huff had a question. I think this is for Les. I noticed near field monitors at front of house. Are they used for talkback, cue, mix reference, hold your Coca-Cola?
I just use it for cue rather than slap on some headphones, just to solo up.
Yeah.
That's basically all I use it for.
Fantastic. So that Edward, I think that answers your question. Do you use any near field speakers up front of the stage? Well, the front fields are 4886s, if that's what you're referring to for front fields. So let's see. Edward had a question for the monitoring. What kind of wedges are you using?
Acoustics,
Yep.
IQ 115 XTs. So
Right.
it's a coaxial with a 15-inch in it.
And I think we talked about the consoles. I think you mentioned the monitor console is a PM10 and the front house is a PM7 at the Ryman, right?
That's critical, is that both houses try to match components as much as possible. Same monitors, same close to same mixing board.
Yep.
And we use the same mics, so they have that consistency that it works.
Yeah. We have a good question for Steve Ponsetto. How you doing, Steve? It's good to see you. Are you guys using PM and Lake? And so the answer is yes. PM was used all throughout the system tuning, and of course, Les, you guys have both access to Lakes that are used for your contouring and for the guest engineers, et cetera, et cetera.
The Lake is pretty flat. Isn't that correct, Les? Didn't we do almost all the tunings in the PM, and the Lake is pretty flat?
Yeah, it is. And then I could give the Lake to a visiting engineer with his page, and he could do whatever he wants, and whatever happens, happens.
Exactly. We had a question from Brian Jones. Are there any aux feeds for in-ear monitors? And if so, how many?
We've got, for the Opry, we've got 8 wireless ears, and that's what we've got at both houses. We also have a couple wired ear mixes out on the stage available as well. Okay.
So basically, an artist can, anybody can come in and you can get whatever you want, wedge mixes. I don't recall seeing side fills at either venue, right?
No, we
side
don't have
fills.
any side fills.
I got you.
Trying to keep the stage volume down when we can.
Right.
The only time we really encouraged side fills was Wu-Tang Clan. Really didn't have enough. Should have doubled.
Right. Let's see. I think that's pretty much all of the questions we have. Mallory, are you there? Let's see. One more question here. Another question, but a comment. Having mixed up the Ryman a few times over the year, Les is the most gracious host. He knows the room intimately, and listening to his sage advice has helped me to have some memorable shows over the years. That's from Harley Sinker. Thank you, Harley. I completely agree with you. That's why I wrote on my notes, listen to the house engineer. So, yes, please save yourself the trouble. So, even Sarge listens to Les. So, I think that brings us to the last set of questions. I'm going to scroll to the next and final slide that has your contact information. And Mallory, I don't know if you have some closing remarks for us.
Thank you guys so much for this session. It was great. And I want to thank everyone that attended today. And just a reminder that you can look at Harman for the upcoming sessions that we have. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. For those of you, tomorrow we'll have another live workshop series event with Cookie Huff and Pooch Van Druten. Both of them good friends of the Ryman. Guys, you guys are family. It's always great to see you. And I appreciate so much you joining us and sharing some of your expertise with our audience. Thank you, Nick. I hope everything was well in Minnesota. We hope that things progress and that we get back to the Ryman to have a full house. I think we are up to 250 now, right, Les?
That's correct. That's what's happening.
250 people. So let's just keep it going. Let's keep safe. And let's see. Did somebody put one more question? No, I think we're good. So everybody, stay safe. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Talk to you guys.
Thanks, Ro.
See you guys.